What if a single meeting on Valentine's night could unravel every illusion of safety you ever trusted? Beneath cheerful heart-shaped balloons and storefront lights, a young mother arrives expecting a routine talk about co-parenting. Instead, she steps into a moment balanced precariously between hope and danger, where one turn of events will shock an entire community. Shoppers wander by, blissfully unaware of how swiftly love can transform into devastation. Amid the hum of idling cars and last-minute gift seekers, uneasy tension crackles in the shadows. In a matter of seconds, muffled voices will escalate into a confrontation that ends in sudden tragedy, witnessed by the other woman at his side. Could such a nightmare possibly unfold in a place meant for romance and reassurance? Are you ready to discover the fragile line where trust turns lethal, forever changing one family's future? Welcome to True Crime Acts, where we look into the hidden truths behind some of the most chilling real-life events. Our mission is to uncover the stories that shock, educate, and spark change, reminding us that behind every headline is a victim, a family, and a ripple effect felt by an entire community. If you find this journey as important as we do, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell to ensure you never miss another gripping exploration into the depths of human behavior. Valentine's Day at Lake Crest Village usually sparkled with excitement. Shops open late for last-minute roses and gift bags, couples strolling hand-in-hand beneath decorative hearts taped to glass doors, and the faint aroma of sweet confections wafting from nearby bakeries. It was the kind of evening most associated with warmth, unity, and maybe a touch of whimsy. An evening that seemed to promise goodwill to anyone passing through. Yet by 11:15 p.m., the bustle had diminished. A hush settled over shuttered storefronts, with just a handful of people trickling in and out of the few businesses still open. Overhead, fluorescent lights in the parking lot buzzed softly, casting halos on the asphalt. Through this dimness drove Chastity Sparkman, age 26, her heart thrumming from more than just the chilly air. She wasn't here to celebrate romance, but to meet her ex-husband, a conversation she hoped would be brief and amicable. Friends would later say she picked Lake Crest Village for its public setting, convinced that no serious harm could come beneath those bright overhead lamps. What she failed to foresee was how the supposed safety net of a busy commercial strip could unravel if someone arrived determined to cause harm. Between leftover Valentine's balloons fluttering in the breeze and the occasional car rolling by, a brooding tension hung unseen, like storm clouds cloaked by a starless sky. Chastity parked near a neon heart sign flashing pink against the darkness, the comedic innocence of the Valentine's decor, contrasting sharply with the dread settling in the pit of her stomach. Stepping out of her sedan, she double-checked a text from her sister. "You sure you'll be okay?" To which she'd replied, "Yes, I'll handle it." For Chastity, everything hinged on open communication. She had no wish for a drawn-out conflict, especially not on a day devoted to love and tenderness. Even if her own marriage had frayed, her devotion to a peaceful resolution for the children's sake propelled her forward. And so, under the fading Valentine's cheer, she prepared to meet Isaiah James, unaware that this lot would soon witness the collapse of every protective assumption she'd held. Somewhere in the dim corners stood her ex-husband, accompanied by a figure she never expected to see here. How could a night associated with hearts, flowers, and the promise of togetherness become the final chapter of a mother's life story? Chastity Sparkman grew up in a family of 20 siblings, a fact that might astonish an outsider, but one which she navigated with remarkable poise. In that lively home environment, she evolved into the peacekeeper, the sibling others turned to for level-headed mediation. Whenever arguments flared, Chastity waded in calmly, determined to preserve harmony. She believed wholeheartedly that any conflict, no matter how heated, could be mitigated by dialogue and a willingness to forgive. Her father, Alfonso Sparkman, often credited her empathy for holding the family's varied personalities together. She extended that same empathetic spirit to every facet of her life, whether it was her budding beauty business, her college classes, or the raising of her two children, 8-year-old Zai and 6-year-old Priscilla. Each day she juggled shipping out hair products, attending lectures, and helping with the kids' homework. Despite the hectic schedule, Chastity radiated optimism in her social media posts. Snapshots of bedtime reading sessions, glimpses of new lash styles she was stalking, or uplifting quotes she discovered in psychology textbooks. If there was one thing everyone agreed upon, it was that she lived for her children. She made sure to be present at their school activities, from parent-teacher meetings to casual bake sales. Priscilla adored dressing up in pretend makeup alongside her mother's real product line, while Zai enjoyed practicing sports in the park, always hearing Chastity's encouraging voice from the sidelines. And beyond the children, she never failed to check in on her siblings, bridging generational gaps in a family so large that remembering birthdays alone was a Herculean task. But behind that radiant demeanor, Chastity carried the weight of a marriage strained by distance and uncertainty. She'd married Isaiah James young, believing in the potential of their relationship. Over time, disagreements multiplied, yet she clung to her core philosophy that patience and honest communication could rescue even the most troubled bond. Friends gently suggested she might be too hopeful, but Chastity shook off their caution. A part of her refused to give up on forging a healthy environment for her children, an environment in which both parents played a role. Until the final weeks, Chastity maintained confidence that talking things through remained the best path. She was, after all, the problem solver. The day she drove to Lake Crest Village, she carried that same gentle conviction, unwaveringly believing in the power of reasoned discussion. Was her steadfast faith in reconciliation a final gift to those who loved her, or the very key that led her to a tragic final meeting? Chastity met Isaiah James as a teenager, when life still felt brimming with possibilities. They bonded over shared laughter, weekend adventures, and that sweet belief in conquering adversity together. Friends teased them about being inseparable, Chastity giggling brightly whenever Isaiah showed up unannounced, his own eyes shining with undisguised admiration. Over time, they married and brought 2 children into the world, further solidifying what many once saw as a romance that promised endurance. But real life doesn't always bend to youthful ideals. Isaiah landed on the wrong side of the law, culminating in his incarceration for reasons that remained hazy. Some rumored minor offenses, others whispered more serious charges. During his imprisonment, Chastity refused to sever ties, believing in second chances. She regularly updated him about the children's milestones and even handled his emotional ups and downs with unwavering patience. She'd say, "He's still their father," a sentence that encapsulated her views on familial unity. However, prison walls often incubate distrust. As months passed, calls turned tense. Isaiah's questions about Chastity's daily activities grew sharper, and accusations of betrayal or abandonment peppered their once friendly chats. Where she had expected gratitude for keeping him involved, she found suspicion. Where she offered news about college classes or product launches, he responded with stony silence or derisive comments. Occasionally, Chastity confided in a sibling about his mood swings, but she downplayed the severity, attributing it to the stress of incarceration. By the time Isaiah completed his sentence, a chasm had formed. The man who left prison no longer matched Chastity's cherished memories of the sweet teenager who'd wooed her. Instead, he appeared burdened by resentments and insecurities. Hints of a new relationship surfaced too, someone named Aona Burgos, sparking further confusion. Had Isaiah moved on while still insisting on controlling Chastity's life? She found herself torn between relief that he'd seemingly found a fresh start and alarm at his unrelenting focus on her. Still, Chastity clung to the possibility of smoothing out disagreements for the sake of their children. The date, Valentine's Day, became a point of irony. Perhaps, in her mind, meeting on a day of love might instill calm, reminding them both of gentler times. She told her sisters, "We just need to talk in person. Then maybe we can settle everything peacefully." Could the man she once believed deserved a second chance become her greatest threat? Blind to how quickly love can distort into lethal obsession? In the final weeks before Valentine's Day, subtle changes in Chastity's routine signaled deeper strain. While she continued to run her beauty business and attend college, her social media updates shifted from frequent cheerful posts to carefully curated glimpses. Gone were the everyday behind-the-scenes snaps of her kids or casual self-portraits. Friends who texted her often got delayed responses or one-liners. Something had shifted, though she brushed off concerns with a quick, "I'm just busy." A larger part of that strain traced back to Isaiah's erratic behavior. Freed from prison but not from suspicion, he bombarded her with calls. Some calls overflowed with bitterness, others carried sweet apologies and pleas for a fresh start. That unpredictable mix tore at Chastity's nerves. Meanwhile, Aona Burgos lurked on the periphery, a name often mentioned in passing but never fully explained. People wondered if she contributed to Isaiah's hostility, or if her presence offered some kind of twisted alliance, a two-against-one dynamic that put Chastity on guard. As Valentine's Day neared, Chastity's circle advised caution. Her siblings suggested meeting Isaiah in broad daylight, or not meeting him at all if his temper seemed that volatile. But Chastity remained committed to achieving a stable co-parenting framework. She kept saying, "We owe it to the kids to sort this out." Perhaps she underestimated the depth of Isaiah's grudges, or maybe she hoped the day's romantic context would diffuse negativity. Either way, the wheels were set in motion. On the morning of February 14th, Chastity kept her routine. She prepared breakfast for Zai and Priscilla, dropped them at school, and managed a short shift shipping her beauty products. A friend at college recalled her looking distracted, glancing at her phone more often than usual. By late afternoon, she confirmed to one sister that she'd be meeting Isaiah around 11 p.m. at Lake Crest Village, wanting to make sure the shops and restaurants would still have some foot traffic. She believed the presence of others would keep things in check. Nevertheless, the tension was tangible. Over dinner, she spoke softly to her children, reassuring them she'd see them before midnight. She even joked about picking up leftover Valentine's treats at a discount if the talk went well. In a life guided by an unwavering faith in reconciliation, she might not have fully grasped how drastically the narrative had changed around her. Could a mother's earnest bid for a peaceful resolution truly stand against the silent but rising fury of someone determined to strike where love had once thrived? Valentine's Day at Lake Crest Village still shone with vestiges of holiday cheer. Paper hearts dangled in store windows. A few couples, arms interlocked, ambled to their cars, balancing takeaway boxes from last-minute dinners. For most, it was a night of quiet romance and subtle gestures. For Chastity Sparkman, it was an appointed hour she both dreaded and felt duty-bound to keep. She parked in a well-lit sector of the parking lot, hoping the overhead glare would deter any confrontation from escalating. A glance at her phone showed messages from a sibling. "Call me if anything seems off." She typed back a quick reassurance and exhaled. This was no place to let anxiety take over. She had a purpose. She had just enough time to finalize co-parenting details with Isaiah James, then hurry home to her children, maybe share a small piece of Valentine's candy or a short bedtime story. Within a few minutes, another car pulled up. Isaiah stepped out first, but not alone. Beside him stood Aona Burgos. The presence of a third party on what Chastity presumed would be a two-person discussion sent a jolt of apprehension through her. Yet outwardly, she maintained composure, reminding herself that public spaces exist for precisely this reason, to ensure accountability and safety. From across the lot, a shop employee locking up for the night noticed them converging. He later recalled a stiff awkwardness. Chastity spoke calmly, Isaiah retorted sharply, and Aona hovered as though waiting for a cue. Even so, the entire scene might have appeared to a casual observer like a couple sorting out an argument. Nothing more unusual than a spat happening on a day ironically known for love. Moments in, tension escalated. Their voices grew louder, body language more intense. Eyewitnesses described Chastity attempting to keep the discussion civil, but Isaiah's tone hinted at deeper resentment. The swirling lights from leftover Valentine's displays provided a strangely eerie backdrop for the rising friction. How quickly a public, safe conversation might transform into a harrowing standoff seemed unthinkable. In the creeping tension of that darkening lot, was there a fleeting chance for peace to hold? Or was the path already laid for a single, catastrophic turning point? In the quiet corners of Lake Crest Village, the clash between Chastity, Isaiah, and Aona reached its breaking point. A few onlookers, finishing their Valentine's errands, had a sense something was off, but couldn't quite place their finger on it. Just an argument, they assumed. Then the argument's volume surged. with Isaiah's posture turning aggressively rigid while Chastity took a step back, presumably in alarm. Accounts vary on the exact sequence of words, but every retelling agrees on one pivotal moment. Isaiah James produced a firearm. The overhead bulbs caught the metal's dull gleam, and time seemed to freeze. Chastity must have realized instantly the danger she was in, but reflex or shock kept her from fully escaping. In mere heartbeats, the threat turned real. Gunshots shattered the hush of the February night. One bystander later recounted hearing what sounded like a car backfiring, only to see Chastity collapse onto the cold asphalt. Initial confusion gripped the handful of witnesses, some ducking behind their vehicles. Others scrambled for phones, frantically calling 911. The echo of the shots faded, replaced by Chastity's pained cry that lingered eerily in the air. Isaiah and Aona, however, didn't remain at the scene. Shocked employees from a nearby store saw them sprint toward their car, tires squealing as they fled. The leftover Valentine's lights twinkled ironically in the background, an empty testament to the day's intended joy. Paramedics arrived with remarkable speed, racing to treat a severely injured Chastity. Onlookers tried to help direct the emergency crew or offer emotional support, but the situation was stark. Despite the frantic attempts at stabilization, the wound proved devastating. In an instant, the woman who left home that evening expecting to finalize co-parenting details had lost her fight for life. The abrupt violence stunned Sacramento. Within minutes, the scene became a flurry of police cruisers, glaring lights illuminating chalk outlines and bullet casings. The clash that Valentine's Day was no mere lover's quarrel, but a fatal assault, leaving a mother's future cut short amid holiday banners and pink balloons. By morning, news of the homicide would reverberate across local television screens and social media feeds, carrying one piercing question: how did a routine meeting to protect her children end with the brutal end of everything Chastity believed in? As dawn approached, Chastity Sparkman's family learned of her murder in fragments, calls and texts that spread the grim reality long before any official statement could be released. Gasping sobs echoed in the Sparkman home, where siblings and relatives gathered, desperately attempting to console one another in the face of an unthinkable tragedy. No one had been prepared for such abrupt, irreversible news on what was meant to be a day of love and celebration. The grief weighed especially heavy on Z and Priscilla, the children now devoid of their mother's reassuring presence. Relatives recall them asking, "Where did Mommy go?" in voices trembling with innocence. Explanations about "she's in a better place" rung hollow in their ears, the concept of finality far beyond their grasp. Close friends and neighbors arrived with food, prayers, and tears, forming a protective circle around the kids. But as the house filled with quiet sobs, the emptiness left by Chastity's absence felt insurmountable. Meanwhile, the broader Sacramento community reacted with outrage and sorrow. The incident took over local headlines: Valentine's Day murder claims young mother, fatal shooting shocks neighborhood. Some expressed guilt, wondering if passers-by at the parking lot that night could have intervened had they recognized the danger sooner. Others criticized society's complacency when it comes to domestic tensions, believing that just because a confrontation is personal doesn't mean onlookers should walk away. Within 24 hours, people spontaneously started a memorial near the spot where Chastity was shot. Candles, photos, and stuffed animals formed a small shrine overshadowed by leftover Valentine's decorations. The irony was lost on no one. Pink hearts fluttered overhead, a vestige of romance, while below them flickered candles for a life cut short. The arrangement took on a haunting symbolism of how swiftly affection can twist into catastrophe. Churches in the district held vigils, inviting community leaders to speak about preventing domestic violence and recognizing the signs of escalating danger. Attendees who had never met Chastity shed tears for her, moved by the story of a mother striving for calm in a co-parenting discussion on a day meant for love. Despite the heartbreak, many channeled that energy into demanding action. Calls for safe custody exchange locations, better policing of known volatile ex-partners, and awareness campaigns across local schools. Would these efforts to transform tragedy into reform truly take root, or would time erode the urgency until another tragedy reawakens everyone once again? Within hours of the shooting, Isaiah James and Aona Burgos vanished. Police arrived at Lake Crest Village to find Chastity mortally wounded and witnesses too shaken to provide immediate clarity on the suspect's whereabouts. Investigators established roadblocks throughout Sacramento that night, but the pair slipped away, leaving an entire city anxious for answers. As the Sparkman family reeled from the loss, local law enforcement escalated the search into a full-blown manhunt. At first, tips trickled in, some offering sightings at a nearby gas station or along the city outskirts. Each lead produced fervent investigative activity, only to come up short. Eventually, the case garnered more attention from regional media, which broadcast pleas for public help and plastered the suspect's photos on screens and online bulletins. The father of 2 young children had become a wanted man, accused of shooting the very mother he once professed to love. Weeks dragged on with no capture. Clues emerged pointing to possible movements across state lines, Utah, Nevada, perhaps as far as Colorado. Frustration mounted among Sacramento residents, who questioned how 2 individuals could vanish so thoroughly. Meanwhile, detectives labored around the clock, coordinating with federal agencies to track financial transactions, phone pings, and any hint of connections to distant relatives or friends. Finally, nearly a month after Chastity's death, law enforcement received a significant tip placing Isaiah and Aona in New York City. A multi-agency task force converged on a small, low-budget motel where they'd reportedly been hiding. Early morning, officers secured the building. The suspects were found in a cramped room, apparently exhausted from their evasion of authorities. No shootout, no high-speed chase. A quiet takedown brought them into custody. The end of a spree that had left Sacramento haunted by unanswered questions. News of the arrests raced across the city. Some felt relief that justice might be served, while others braced for the painful legal battles to follow. The Sparkman family, though gratified that the pair was no longer at large, still struggled with the emptiness of a mother lost forever. In a brief public statement, they thanked the police and the supportive neighbors who refused to let Chastity's case fade from collective memory. Would the upcoming trial unlock the truth behind their motives, or would the tragedy remain an enigma of human rage masked by Valentine's illusions? Back in Sacramento, with Isaiah James and Aona Burgos in custody, the district attorney wasted no time filing formal charges. Isaiah faced first-degree murder, reflecting a prosecution theory that the Valentine's Day confrontation wasn't a random, impulsive act. Meanwhile, Aona faced accomplice liability and potential additional counts tied to the flight across multiple states. Local reporters described the impending case as one of the city's most heartbreaking in years, centered on a mother's final stand for peaceful co-parenting, cut down by gunfire. The first court appearances sparked intense media attention. Chastity's family arrived dressed in t-shirts bearing her photograph, seeking both solace and a sense of solidarity. In the gallery, onlookers included anti-domestic violence advocates, local community leaders, and concerned citizens. Prosecutors argued that phone records, text messages, and witness testimonies suggested Isaiah had planned the confrontation, enlisting Aona's support, or at least complicity. Defense attorneys, however, countered that the incident was a spontaneous escalation, not a preconceived murder. Bail was swiftly denied, reflecting the gravity of the charges and the duo's recent evasion. Meanwhile, the Sparkman family contended with the slow churn of justice. Each hearing confronted them with fresh details, fragments of the night's turmoil, revelations of controlling behavior, arguments about who initiated the violence. Some lamented that the trial would prolong their agony, forcing them to relive the heartbreak publicly. For domestic violence activists, the case stood as a stark reminder that even a well-lit parking lot during a holiday can't guarantee safety if an abuser's mindset is fixed on retaliation. They leveraged the media spotlight to advocate for safe custody exchange zones near law enforcement facilities and urged those in troubled relationships to remain vigilant. The city's awareness soared, with multiple organizations distributing literature on warning signs of escalating tensions, hoping to prevent another young mother's tragedy. But for all the policy changes and heartfelt calls for vigilance, the trial still loomed. The courts prepared for a lengthy process, including potential pretrial motions over evidence and mental health evaluations. All the while, 2 innocent children grieved in the background, motherless, grappling with nightmares and the everyday ache of an absent hug. Could the punishment or outcome of these proceedings ever fill the gaping void left behind, or would the heartbreak remain a permanent scar on every Valentine's Day to come? In the aftermath of their mother's violent death, Zai and Priscilla found themselves encompassed by extended relatives, well-meaning aunts, uncles, grandparents, yet still missing the soft voice that once ushered them to bed or cheered their every success. At only 8 and 6, they struggled to fathom why mommy didn't come home, a question repeated in tear-choked whispers that tugged mercilessly at the family's heartstrings. The Sparkmans rallied, establishing a new routine, supervised childcare, sessions with counselors, and a secure environment to ensure the children felt loved. But the hole Chastity left behind was enormous. She had been more than just a mother. She was the family's peacekeeper, an empathetic soul who believed fiercely in the power of forgiveness. In her stead, sorrow clung to holiday gatherings that once overflowed with chatter and laughter. Now, each passing milestone, birthdays, family reunions, echoed with the awareness that one seat remained empty. Outside the family circle, the broader community grappled with a haunting realization. If violence could erupt on a day devoted to love, was anywhere truly safe from unresolved anger and obsession? The story of Chastity's last stand in a public lot sparked fervent advocacy. Local organizations raised funds to develop secure exchange points for co-parents, placed near law enforcement offices, ensuring that no one else would have to meet under such vulnerable circumstances. Meanwhile, domestic violence helplines reported a slight uptick in calls, indicating that people, moved by Chastity's fate, were stepping forward to seek help. Still, no measure of justice could restore what had been destroyed. As Isaiah James and Aona Burgos awaited trial, rumors swirled about how the proceedings might unfold, but that did little to soothe the ache left behind. In the quiet hush of late nights, Zai and Priscilla sometimes asked if they could still celebrate Valentine's Day. Each time, someone in the Sparkman household promised they'd continue traditions in memory of their mother. A mother whose own belief in love and dialogue ended so brutally. Yet that promise couldn't mask one abiding truth. Her story would forever remind them how illusions of safety can crumble if a heart once filled with affection degenerates into rage. Heart-shaped decorations and pink streamers are no shield against a determined harm. Will we take this tragedy as a mandate to protect the vulnerable and speak out against hidden violence? Or will complacency keep haunting our communities until the next unimaginable loss occurs? In the hushed aftermath of this tragedy, 2 children remain at the center of our thoughts, a mother's love cruelly taken from them on the very day devoted to affection. Even as legal battles proceed and a community presses for reforms, one pressing truth demands our focus. We cannot let grief be the final chapter. By recognizing early warning signs, challenging complacency, and offering refuge to those in volatile circumstances, we can work toward a future where stories like this never repeat. If you found this content meaningful, remember to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and click the notification bell, so these critical narratives reach more eyes and ears. Will you help transform this heartbreak into a beacon of awareness, ensuring that others don't suffer the same devastating fate?